I'd like to introduce our next two speakers, and we're very pleased and thrilled to have Dr. Aram Hezel and Dr. Hucky Land here today with us. Dr. Hezel is an Associate Professor of Medicine, Vice Chief of the Division of Hematology and Oncology, as well as the Director of the Pancreatic and Hepato-billiary Cancer Program at the Wilmot Cancer Institute at the University of Rochester and Strong Memorial Hospital. He is focused on clinical research, testing new therapies in gastrointestinal malignancies and on the genetics of biology of primary pancreatic and liver tumors. Dr. Hucky Land is Director of Research and Co-Director of the Wilmot Cancer Institute. Together, Dr. Hucky Land and Dr. Aram Hezel identified a new target in the process of garbage recycling that occurs within the cancer cell, which is critical to pancreatic cancer progression and growth. From this research, the National Cancer Institute awarded more than $2 million to this team to continue their study of a gene network that controls cancer progression. I'd like to introduce Dr. Hezel.
So, first of all, thanks for coming. It's a real pleasure to be speaking to you all and to have an event focused on something that is really important to all of us and clearly to all of you. And thanks for organizing this. Again, I'm really grateful for this day and time together. I'm going to speak broadly for about 10 minutes, and then Hucky's going to speak more specifically about some of our research. And so, as always, these are more interesting. If a question comes up, feel free to holler at me. If I start to bore you, throw something. And applause is welcome at any moment if I'm really inspirational in any way. So we're going to start with a pretty broad perspective on human life in general. And these are the top 3 causes of mortality in the U.S. for the past 50 years. And this is just to get a sort of global sense on cancer in general and how it fits. And the curve up here is a death rate for heart disease. And back in 1960, these are years on the bottom, and these are 10 deaths per 10,000 people. So back in 1960, the heart disease was clearly the top killer of people in the U.S. and took somewhere around 70 or 80 lives per 10,000 people. Cancer at that point was taking about 20 people per 10,000. And you can see here as time marched on, death rates from cancer increased slightly, and heart disease started to plummet as people learned about things like cholesterol and hypertension, and drugs were developed to treat this. And right now, the last year that we have the data for this on this graph is 2010. These, by the way, are the presidents. So this is to make both Republicans and Democrats in the audience feel happy. You could say that it was Republican policy in the 80s that led to the steep decline in cancer rates. Or if you're Bill Clinton, you could say, I stepped in and things got better. At any rate, that's what this is. But right now, we're in a horse race in this country for what's the big threat to all of us. And it has always historically been heart disease, but my guess is at this point it's probably cancer has overcome it as the kind of #1 threat to us all. So as you saw here, cancer death rates have started to diminish. So there is some hope here, and here's an example of another type of cancer that I treat, that Vivek is involved in screening for and in fact preventing, and that's colon cancer. And you can see here there's been a steady a relatively slow rate of decline, but its rate of decline in deaths from colon cancer, this is from 1990 through 2012. And the other thing that's interesting is new cases have diminished. And that's because people have colonoscopies. And so the cancers don't have a chance to start. This is prevention. So this is a place where we've been successful. Yeah.
Like, new cases are going down because the colonoscopies are detecting precancerous conditions that are being surgically removed?
Exactly. All those polyps that VVEC removes on colonoscopies could become cancers, but if you get them early, they don't have a chance to become cancerous. Does that make sense? So this is the same type of graph for pancreatic cancer. Pancreatic cancer, I feel like we're all seeing a little more of, although part of it is the population is aging, and these are age-adjusted. But the new cases are relatively static per 100,000 people, and the death rate has been static. And so it's a place where we have yet to have a serious impact and cause those curves to shift down. Now, one key thing that has been touched on early, but that is important, is that the pancreas is an organ that has many different cells. So the pancreas controls digestion, and there are islet cells in the pancreas, or neuroendocrine cells, that control insulin and body energy levels. And so we have a group here of many people that are interested in pancreatic cancer, and my guess is some of the people here are interested because of pancreatic neuroendocrine tumors. I don't know if you want to put hands up, but it's kind of always interesting to look at the, and then a lot of people here are interested in pancreatic adenocarcinoma, or the more common pancreatic cancer when we think of pancreatic cancer. So the pancreas has these different cell types, and from each cell type comes cancer. So acinar cells make digestive enzymes. And there are relatively few acinar cell tumors. My guess is no one here has an acinar cell cancer or knows someone with one. I see one every 3 or 4 years. There are also islet cell or neuroendocrine tumors, and in this country there are about 1,000 cases a year. And so we have some people here for whom that is a chief interest. And then the more common cancer is ductal adenocarcinoma. And you can see based on the numbers, there are about 45,000 cases of this a year as opposed to 1,000. Now, I treat and am interested in both cancer types, but it's important to note that how we treat, the genetics, and the relative success of treatment is quite different between the two groups. So we have a number of new treatments in the past 5 years for this kind of cancer. And really over the past 5 to 10 years, we probably have about twice as many kind of new kinds of treatment for this cancer. And so they behave differently and act differently. And I thought that would be an important thing just to cover. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. So I'm a medical oncologist and a scientist, and I've been working with Hucky Land. And one of the goals of what I do, since I'm not in the prevention business, which is clearly a very important part of diminishing death rates from cancer, but I meet people who have cancer, and we're always trying to figure out better treatments. And so what we would say is the holy grail of cancer treatment and research are treatments that work really well, that are kind of tailored for a specific person, personalized or precise, and that don't have too many side effects. And in my own line of work, I have a handful of these that exist. So I thought I'd give an example of one that works really well, and then we'll talk about where we want to get to in pancreatic cancer. So we know that normal cells become cancerous because of gene mutations. So there are mutations in genes, and the mutations cause cancer. And there's a sense that when a gene is mutated, it becomes addictive to the cancer cell, meaning cancers need to have that thing around to propel them forward, to tell them to grow, to cause problems. And so a lot of cancer therapy, when you read about things in the paper or press, a new therapy will come about that works really well. It's often focused on this mutated oncogene. It's like a treatment that works against the gene, and then it works against the cancer. And so this has worked really well, and Huckey calls this targeted cancer treatment 1.0. So focusing on the mutated gene. And these are some drugs, which maybe you've heard of, if you know other people with other cancers that work well.
So
Yep.
the oncogene is the genetic change within the cancer cell that is
Yes.
converted it from a normal to a cancer cell.
Yeah, so in our bodies we have the same gene, but then the gene suffers a mutation. And often that's just by bad luck. There was a paper out recently that suggests a lot of these mutations don't have to do with the environment. It's just, it's bad luck that people get cancer or that these mutations happen. This is an example, this is actually a picture that shows you one of these mutations. So this is in esophageal cancer, and each one of these little red dots represents one of these genes, a gene called HER2/neu that's amplified. There are more copies of it. So this is kind of like having like a lot of accelerators in your car or something, all pressed down to the ground. The green dots are sort of normal DNA spots, and there should be 2 in each cell. But here you can see a nucleus of the cell, which harbors the DNA, and there are about 20 red dots, 20 of these genes that are turned on. And this affects about 15% of patients with this cancer type. Well, there's a great drug called Herceptin used in breast cancer, which we now use. And so here's an example of a patient of mine who had a young man with a metastatic esophageal cancer. Here's the cancer. This is a PET scan. Here's some spots in the lung. And after treatment, these went away. And this is a cancer for which people can commonly survive 10, 11 months. And he's had this for 3 years. So this is kind of a remarkable advance. But it doesn't help everyone. And it certainly doesn't help anyone with pancreatic cancer. So existing targeted therapies are great. We're really happy that we have them. Given our focus on pancreatic cancers, we need to focus on some other approaches, different approaches. And the reason for this is that there's the gene in the common pancreatic cancer is called KRAS. That's a gene where the mutations are difficult to target. So this is my great PowerPoint experiment this morning. This is our target, and we'll see if this works. See? When we try to target KRAS, it doesn't work. Do you want to see that again, or was that enough for everyone? Do it again. I got up at 4 in the morning. It took 4 hours to put together to convey the point. Oh. So this is a picture of pancreatic cancer. And I'd say globally right now, there are 2 general approaches being used nationally, internationally, and here in Rochester. One is to get a better handle on these cancer cells. This is a picture of pancreatic cancer under the microscope. These are cancer cells. The other question is to understand all the stuff around the pancreatic cancer cells. This is all called stroma. These are fibroblasts and inflammatory cells. These are blood cells. And another approach that has globally been successful in the past few years in cancer, in which we have great excitement about, both here in Rochester and nationally, is to understand this. And one of the reasons we're excited here is because David Linehan studies this and has made real progress in understanding these cells that enable or allow the cancer cells to survive and live, and perhaps protect them. What Huckey and I have studied are the cancer cells themselves, and trying to understand genes other than the mutated genes that help them all grow. And at this point, I'm going to hand the stage over to Huckey, my bearded friend and colleague.